Welcome back to the channel. This is a More Better Ascend coming at you with a modern Stompy green Landfall deck. Now, this deck is pretty powerful, kind of a glass cannon, but it's got a lot of tools that are going to keep you ramping and keeping you alive and putting out giant creatures out onto the battlefield. This deck comes in at $193. If you just take out your 3 bristly bills, this will bring it down to about $60. But you just have to find another card to replace those 3 bristly bills with, and it's a pretty important card for this deck, but it could also operate without it. Let's take a look at the deck, let's go through it and the synergies and break it down. Alright, starting at 1 mana, we have Landfall Elves. This is a reprint from Foundations, but obviously it's still legal in Modern. It's been reprinted 9 million times. But this is just the perfect card for this deck. It's a perfect ramp card. Turn 1, throw that down. It can tap for mana. Just gets you all of your things out a lot faster and getting to the big boys that we need to get to in this deck. As you can see by the deck, though, there isn't anything castable over 3 mana except for Nissa. So 3 mana is your ceiling. So just having the Landfall Elves out there gets you to cast your entire deck by turn 2. Okay, so we're going to have 4 Landfall Elves, then we're going to go with Bushwhack. Now this serves as 2 purposes. We're going to have big boys on the field, so you can have them fight. This is our removal spell for the deck. We have 4 of them, but it also lets you search for a basic land and put it in your hand in case you are out of lands or you need that extra land for something. And also this deck has a lot of landfall and other types of triggers that it matters how many lands you have. So this is the perfect card with the 2 sides to it that you can do multiple things for everything that this deck needs. It's just a nice tool to have in your tool belt. After that, we have Snakeskin Veil. This is a 1 mana instant that does 2 nice things. It's a good protection spell for when people are trying to remove your creatures. You know, we're kind of going all in on certain creatures here, so you want to be able to keep them protected. And then it also adds a nice +1/+1 counter to the creature as well, which that will come important and come into play a little later, and we'll let you know about that when we get to those creatures. Then we have Insidious Fungus. This is from Duskmourn. This is a 1 mana fungus that comes in as a 1/2, so it's a nice 1 mana play. Just because it's a nice 2 toughness on it, so it can block a lot of things. But it also has another mode on it that adds a lot of flexibility for your deck. You can pay 2 and then sacrifice this creature, and then you get to do one of these 3 things. So this adds a lot of flexibility because you can destroy artifacts, you can destroy enchantments, and you know, if they throw out a Leyline Binding or you know, anything that traps creatures with the enchantment, or if there's just an enchantment on the field that's really bothering you, like maybe, you know, an Omniscience or something like that, you can destroy it with just this little Insidious Fungus. And then at the bottom, draw a card, and then you can put a land from your hand onto the battlefield tapped. So it's a good ramp card. You can get out another land out that turn to just kind of ramp up and get to where we need to be. And add more landfall triggers for Bristly Bill. Now, Bristly Bill is a 2 mana 2/2 legendary, and it says landfall. Whenever a land enters the battlefield under your control, put a 1/1 counter on target creature, and then for 5 mana you can double the number of +1/+1 counters on each creature you control. So, you know, you get one of these guys down on turn 2, you throw your Landfall Elves down on turn 1, and then you put your Bristly Bill down before you put your land down for turn, and then you put your land down, and now all of a sudden you have a 3/3, or you have 2 2/2s. So that's a nice bonus of getting a larger creature out faster. And then every time with all these other creatures like the Insidious Fungus, you know, an extra land came into play that turn if you sacrificed it. So now this gets another +1/+1 counter or whatever other creature you have on the battlefield. The next card, because I was saying before, the amount of lands we have is really important. So the Flourishing Bloomkin is very important. This is a 2 mana 0/0. And it says it gets +1/+1. Now remember, they're not counters, so that's the only bad part, is it just gets +1/+1. So it doesn't really synergize well with the Bristly Bill or anything like that, but for 2 mana, you get +1/+1 for each forest you control. So if we're constantly putting tons of forest out in the battlefield, even if you get this on turn 2 and put that out, it's still a 2/2. And then it just grows every turn. And it could grow by 1 or 2 or 3, depending on what spells we've cast that gets extra lands onto the battlefield. So you get this late game, you're struggling, you're like, oh, I don't know what I'm going to do. You draw into one of these, you can cast it for 2 mana, and now all of a sudden you have like a 2 mana 6/6 or a 2 mana 7/7 or something crazy like that, which is awesome value, especially for a deck like this. It also comes with the ability for disguise, so you can play it upside, face down for 3 mana, and then when you turn it face up for 5, you get to search your library for up to 2 forest cards and reveal them, put 1 of them onto the battlefield, and then 1 into your hand, then shuffle. So, it's kind of like you're really struggling to get to a certain mana level, or you just want that extra trigger of getting another land onto the battlefield, then you can just disguise this if you're a little mana screwed. Now, Ordeal of Myles, we're going to get into after we talk about the next card. Next card is kind of the card that this whole entire deck is centered around. This is Mossborn Hydra. This came out in Foundations. It is a 3 mana Hydra with trample, and it's a 0/0. And it enters with 1 +1/+1 counter on it. So it comes in as a 1/1. Now, normally you'd think this is not a great creature, but then look at the last line where it says Landfall. Whenever a land you control enters, double the number of +1/+1 counters on this creature. So this is why it's so important to have all these lands coming in and multiple lands coming in per turn, because once you get one of these out in the battlefield, it's going to get crazy quick, and you're going to have a gigantic Hydra attacking. So we're all in on this creature, kind of. So it's kind of our win con. So that's why the Snakeskin Veil comes in so important. So when people try to kill it, we get to put a 1/1 counter on it, and it gains hexproof. But then that 1/1 counter gets doubled next time we play a land. So it just kind of gives that extra bump. So that +1/+1 now becomes +2/+2 because we just doubled it the next time we put a land down. So we have a lot of different tricks in this deck on how to get extra lands out. Like I said, the Insidious Fungus, you get to put an extra land out if you sack it, if you happen to draw into one. The Bloomkin gets to bring in lands. And then this is the enchantment that kind of wins the game for us. You get your Hydra out on turn 2 with your Llanowar Elf, and then the next turn you play Ordeal of Myles and play a land. So right now, the Hydra would come out on turn 2 with Llanowar Elves, and then on turn 3 you play a land. So now it becomes a 2/2. It has 2 +1/+1 counters on it, and then you attach this enchantment to the creature. And it says, whenever enchanted creature attacks, put a 1/1 counter on it. Then if it has 3 or more 1/1 counters on it, sacrifice the aura. And then when you sacrifice it, you get to put 2 basic land cards onto the battlefield tapped and shuffled. So let's do the math here. It was a 1/1, and then on turn 3 we put a land down. Now it is a 2/2. Now we play this. It gets a 1/1 counter on it. Now it has 3 or more. So now it's a 3/3. And then we put 2 more lands into play. So then it becomes a 6/6, and then it becomes a 12/12. And you're not going to really win against a 12/12 on that turn. It's just too early to have that big of a creature. But that's what we're trying to do here. Is we're trying to cheat in these extra lands so that this thing gets huge, and then we can just swing in for the victory. Now we have other ways of doing this as well. If the game goes a little longer, or they take care of one of our Mossborn Hydras and we have to cast another one, and then you're thinking, all right, well, I don't have so many lands in my hand anymore. I need to figure out a different way to get more lands on the battlefield so that this Mossborn Hydra can just start going off. So we have Springbloom Druid. Now this is from Modern Horizons 1. This is a 3 mana Elf Druid, 1/1. So it's basically a chump blocker. But it says, when Springbloom Druid enters the battlefield, you may sacrifice a land. If you do, search your library for up to 2 basic land cards, put them on the battlefield tapped, and shuffle your library. So, you may be sacrificing a land. Yes, that sucks. No one wants to sacrifice a land. But you get to put 2 land cards onto the battlefield right after you do that, which triggers the Hydra twice. So you're getting ×2 counters, then ×2 counters again, just like the Ordeal of Myles, but now you get to do it on a later turn or whenever you want, and you're just getting that double trigger again. And you could even do this, Mossborn Hydra down, and then the next turn, if you don't have the Myles, you just play one of these, and it does the same thing. You're getting that double landfall trigger on that creature. Now we have Entis Restoration. This is from Lord of the Rings. This card's pretty cool, just because it's an instant also. So you can attack in with your Mossborn Hydra, and let's say it's a whatever, a 3/3 or something like that, and your opponent's probably thinking, what is he doing attacking with that as a 3/3 if they have like a larger creature? You pay 3, sacrifice a land, search your library for up to 2 basic land cards, then put them onto the battlefield tap, then shuffle. So it's the same thing as the Springbloom Druid, except it doesn't come with a body, but then it has an extra line of text that makes it different from Springbloom Druid. Like, Springbloom Druid's good because you get that extra body on the field as kind of like a chump blocker or whatever, but this adds that extra little oomph on the bottom of it where it says, if you control a creature with power 4 or greater, instead search your library for up to 3 basic land cards and put them on the battlefield tapped and shuffle. So you're going to get 3 landfall triggers. And while you're doing all that, if you have the Bristly Bill out, you can keep putting counters on this Mossborn Hydra while they're, and order the triggers so that you're putting the landfall trigger for Bristly Bill on the Mossborn Hydra and putting that 1/1 counter on it before they double. So then they count as +2/+2. So as long as this Mossborn Hydra is a 4/4 or bigger, you get 3 landfall triggers. So 4/4 becomes an 8/8, becomes a 16/16, becomes a 32/32. A 32/32. If you can't get the job done with a 32/32 with trample, then you got other problems, because that is insane. And then all the while, even if you aren't getting it done, if you have a Bloomkin out, you're going to have a pretty big Bloomkin as well, which is nice. A nice chump blocker. Not even a chump though, because it's just going to be so big, nothing's going to get past it. And then on our top end, we have Nissa, Ascendant Animist. So we're going to be ramping so much that I wanted to have a card in here that had multiple functions, but also was a nice top end that could kind of finish the game for us. So we have all these Bloomkins, and they don't have trample, they have no keywords, so they're just, big bodies. Now, if you're able to get one of these out, this Nissa out for 7 mana, and you -7 it immediately, creatures you control get +1/+1 for each forest you control and gain trample. So if you have 7 mana to get this out, that means your Bloomkin's already a 7/7. So that means all of your Bloomkins, if you have them out in the battlefield, become 14/14s with trample, which that's also going to end a game very easily. And that means your Landfall Elves are going to be 8/8s, your Insidious Funguses are going to be 8/9s, your Springbloom Druids are going to be 8/8s. Those are big boys. Those are very big boys. And then you get these other 2 modes, which are great. Like creating a Phyrexian, there's not a large amount of creatures in this deck, and the creatures kind of have to have, other things going on for them to do well, because most of them are 1/1s or 1/2s. So by putting this out, even if you put this out at 5 and you take the 4 life for it, you get to create a 5/5 right off the bat. And then every turn you can just keep 6/6, 7/7, 8/8, whatever you want to do. Or if you get this out right away and you don't have any other creatures on the battlefield, you just get to create a 7/7 right away, which is great. And then to be able to destroy an artifact or enchantment for only 1 loyalty is pretty insane. This is one of the best planeswalkers I think ever printed, for a mono green deck for sure, or just in general, because we have to sack a creature and then pay 2 also to be able to destroy an artifact or enchantment, and then you get to do this for just -1, and -1 loyalty is like nothing. All right, so we were talking about this deck, talking about all the ways we're going to get lands into play. Now I have other ways of getting some extra triggers on the Hydra and from Bristly Bill in our mana base. So let's drop down to that real quick. 2.08 average mana cost, so nice and low. 24 lands, but we only really have 18 forests. And then we have 4 Fabled Passage, so that counts as a double landfall trigger because you get to put it out there, sack it, and put a land into play. So, and then once you get 4, it just comes in untapped. So you're getting double landfall triggers through that. Your Mossborn Hydra is going to get huge. And then I also have the Blighted Woodland. It's a colorless land, so it can still tap for colorless. You don't have to worry about having tapped lands coming in. And then for 4 mana, you can sacrifice it and search your library for up to 2 basic land cards and put them onto the battlefield tapped and shuffle your library. So, you know, again, you put one of these out and you have your Mossborn Hydra, and then you're kind of in like you don't have any of the other cards that really bring in extra lands to get those extra triggers. Now you have this in your back pocket just sitting in your mana base for 4 mana, and then just sack this and then put 2 basic lands onto the battlefield, and then you get those double triggers for this, and this thing just gets monstrous very, very quickly. Now, I don't think this is a perfect deck. It's kind of a glass cannon deck where we're going all in on this Mossborn Hydra, and that's about it. There are other ways to win, definitely for sure, but I think this deck might need a little extra work. But please let me know what I should add to this. I'm really looking at this deck as a possible great Stompy green landfall deck, but I need some recommendations for other cards that we could add to this that might be able to break the Hydra or have some support to the Hydra a little bit more. So if you have any recommendations, throw them down in the comments, like, comment, subscribe, do all the algorithm things. And until next time, this is a More Better Ascend, and I'll see you for another deck tech.